I hope that it's not the case, that there was a gender issue in terms of the decision that she made. I hope that's not the case. Would it be a shock to me if there were some part of the decision that had to do with her being a woman? It wouldn't be a shock to me.
Ryan Doyle in for Alex Pearson here on Straight Talk. There's Ontario's Premier Kathleen Wynne saying, if gender bias was part of Alison Redford's resignation, it wouldn't shock her. Well, it would shock me because that would ignore the entire culture of entitlement, the fact that she didn't win back her party after she got elected, and the list goes on and on and on. Sarah McIntyre is here to talk about this. I mean, is it true that women have a tougher time, held to a different standard than men in the world of politics? I mean, you've worked in politics for years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think arrogance is really gender specific. And that's
I know a lot of arrogant men.
Yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of arrogant women too.
Sure.
I mean, and that's the crux of the issue. That's why she had to resign. I mean, she had to resign because she, first of all, thought that $45,000 for a trip to South Africa for Nelson Mandela's funeral was, beyond reproach, and she was not going to pay it back initially. She dragged her heels on that, literally, and then eventually apologized and paid it back. So, I mean, this has nothing to do with gender. It has everything to do with an old, tired party, and Alison Redford was, symbolic of that in Alberta.
When you look at it, when you hear Kathleen Wynne using the gender bias line, I mean, to be fair, she got asked the question.
She did.
But she could have shot that question down and said, no, it's 2014. We're all on an equal playing field. She was the premier. I'm a premier. We've had, 4 or 5 female premiers that are still sitting in office. This is not an issue anymore. And she could have dismissed it and diffused it. Instead, she ramped up the issue. Does that not do a bigger disservice to women?
Well, I mean, I think she's a liberal, so everything, she's going to make a bigger issue out of gender issues than anybody else. But I have been watching this from the sidelines, and I do think it's interesting when you look at Dunderdale and you also look at Alison Redford. There's reasons why there the resignations outside of their caucus issues, but really, they were unable to keep their caucus united behind their leadership, and I don't know if that has anything to do with the fact that they're women as opposed to men, and maybe they're unable to really invoke a lot of discipline and unity within the party. But no, I mean, she had to resign because she was arrogant and entitled with respect to taxpayer dollars. Full stop. It had nothing to do with the fact that she was female. I do think, though, there is a reality. I mean, it's a male-dominated industry. Absolutely. It's a white male-dominated industry. I don't think Kathleen Wynne said anything shocking there. I think that's something we all recognize. But there's also a lot more women that are coming to the fold than ever before. And I mean, I think that just shows that there's doors opening, and people and women that are young girls that are growing up see politics as an option, just like they see, astronauts and chemists and all of those other kind of generally male-dominated industries. They don't really look at them that way anymore. They just look at them as different opportunities.
Well, one of those women, Danielle Smith, let's have a look at what she had to say about this. This is Danielle Smith, the Wild Rose Party leader. She's a woman who wants to be premier. This was her reaction.
I'm the leader of the official opposition, and we are one of her fiercest critics. I think people would be hard-pressed to think that I'm being misogynist, and I think that you have to realize there are very strong women in the legislature as well. Laurie Blakeman with the Liberals, Rachel Notley with the NDP. This is not about her gender. This is about her decisions. And the decisions that she made and the actions that she took and the policies she implemented were putting Alberta down the wrong path.
Now, see, that was the answer, Sarah, that Kathleen Wynne should have given, but I think you're right. She's a Liberal, and she probably wouldn't go down that road.
Yeah, and also, I mean, she's not running for, she's not in opposition in Alberta. So, I think as a Liberal, of course, they want to make everything about, unequal opportunity, whether whether it's, racial-based hiring programs, which Kathleen Wynne defended, or whether it's about, gender quotas. That's the typical Liberal response. If there's a problem, then we have to have a government regulation or a government quota in order to fix it. But I mean, it's a reality. I mean, it is a male-dominated industry. I do think that I don't think that there's a different standard of expectations with respect to female politicians. I do think that women are worst critics and fiercest critics. The level of criticism that comes from other female
You're harder on each
politicians.
other than you probably men would be harder on women in that circumstance.
Yeah, well, I mean, and female critics generally tend to go personal at the same time as well, which makes it, even more furious. But, when it comes to Alison Redford's resignation, it had to do with, as Danielle Smith said, it had to deal with her decisions, it had to deal with her leadership, and it had to do with the fact that it was an old, tired party.
She sort of, got away from the brand of the Progressive Conservatives. I mean,
well,
this
even
idea
her being
where,
elected.
Well, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
she decided that she was going to get all of these 2-minute Progressive Conservatives to vote for her, and then they jumped ship. I mean, overall, though, she's taken away from the brand by, talking about the idea of balanced budgets when they're borrowing billions. I mean, that isn't something that this party was built on.
No, I mean, to even call her a conservative is a bit of a stretch, and really, makes the term more elastic than ever. I mean, and I think that's where, the proof is in the pudding when it comes down to what did she do as leader, and talking about, spending, going into debt for capital projects. They brought in new accounting rules in Alberta where they've got capital spending now taken out of the equation when you're looking at balancing the books, which is really just,
It's
funny.
a shell game.
It's a shell game, absolutely, and the opposition's called them out on that. Now, it's what's going to happen in Alberta right now. I mean, you've got the new premier has been sworn in, Dave Hancock, but what does that actually mean?
The infighting hasn't stopped, though, even with him there. So
no, there will continue to be some bloodletting there, and there's no election set for another couple of years, so this could go on for quite some time. And what is that going to do to the Alberta economy? And what is that going to do for the chances of the Wild Rose? Is it really about them now shoring up and becoming the government in waiting?
Yeah, and I think the other thing when we talk about the gender issue, the one question is, well, we're going to have a first female premier of a province. We've done that. We've checked that box. Now they're asking the question, will there be a two-term female premier? It's only a matter of time, and it's not the man that is going to be holding these people down.
No, absolutely not. I mean, voters vote based on action, and the proof will be in the pudding. If you come in and you lead and you keep the economy going and you keep spending in check and you keep taxes low, you're going to be rewarded with a second mandate. But I find, this had more to do with a tired old party that had been in power since 1971 and expected that, the public purse was their own personal purse than it had to do with than gender. So, I think it bodes well for Danielle Smith. She's got another 2 years to build up her party and build up her credibility. And I think she's handled this very well. She hasn't turned up the temperature when it came to any of the expense stories. She just kind of stuck to the same line that this is an old, tired party, and Alberta needs to get rid of them. So I think she's probably in good position right now to look forward to the next election.
Sarah, we appreciate it.
Thanks.
Gina, we're talking about this online as well, the idea of gender playing a factor in Alison Redford's resignation. What are people saying in our poll today?
Well, I'll show you, www.sunnewsnetwork.ca. This is where you can find it at the bottom right-hand side of the page. So we're asking, Alberta, is sexism to blame for Redford's departure? Well, I want to show you some of the results so far today. Only a few hundred people have voted, still early, so get your vote in. 97% of people say no, sexism is not to blame. I was standing in a convenience store lineup, and there were two women behind me, and I thought it was so interesting because they started talking about Alberta politics. And they both said, what a shame that Alison Redford had to resign. And my ears kind of perked up. And one of them said, yeah, it's all because she's a woman. Huh. And I was like, oh, here's one of the people that think that. And it was really interesting to me. And the other woman said, no, I don't think that's the thing. I think that she was bullied by the media. And then it was all about media bias, and then there was a whole gender bias argument, and I listened to them go back and forth. So there's definitely people out there that have sort of latched on to this idea that she was pushed out because of her gender. Others also just finding it ridiculous, like a lot of our viewers.
It's good to know you share the same convenience store as Ontario's Premier Kathleen Wynne. That must be the only person behind you kicking that idea around.
Maybe it was.
We appreciate it. Make sure everybody goes online to vote in our web poll.